In a quiet town where nothing unusual ever happened, a boy began telling people how they would die. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't try to convince anyone. He simply said it. No emotion, no hesitation. Just a sentence, spoken like fact. Most people laughed the first time they heard him. A child, maybe 8 or 9, standing still, looking at someone a little too long, and then quietly describing their final moments. Not in detail, not like a story. Just enough to stay with you. One man remembered it clearly. The boy looked at him and said, "You'll fall right from somewhere high." That was it. No explanation, no reaction. He turned and walked away. Weeks later, that same man was found at the base of a construction site. Witnesses said it didn't make sense. He wasn't supposed to be up there, but he was, and he fell. At first, it was dismissed, a strange coincidence, something people only brought up in private, if they brought it up at all. Until it happened again. Different person, different place. Same quiet voice. Saying something it shouldn't know. No one could explain how he knew. There were no signs, no warnings, nothing to suggest these deaths before they happened. Except him. And the most disturbing part, he was never wrong. The town sat just off a 2-lane highway most people only used to pass through. If you didn't have a reason to stop, you wouldn't. A handful of streets stretched out from a small center. A gas station, a grocery store with a fading sign, a diner where the same booths were filled every morning. Houses were spaced just enough apart to feel private, but close enough that no one was ever truly alone. In the evenings, the town softened, screen doors creaked open, radios played low in the background, dogs barked at nothing in particular, and somewhere, always, a television flickered behind thin curtains. It was the kind of place where people waved without thinking, where names were remembered, and routines rarely changed. This was the late 1990s, before phones carried everything, before news traveled instantly, and if something happened here, it stayed here, passed quietly from one person to another, spoken in low voices over counters and across porches. Everyone knew everyone, not just by name, but by habit. Who opened their shop first? Who locked up last? Who took the same walk every evening? At the same time? And among them was a boy. He was 9 years old. His name was Liam Taylor. He lived with his parents in a modest house near the edge of town, where the road narrowed, and the streetlights grew fewer. Nothing about him stood out at first. He wasn't loud, wasn't withdrawn, didn't cause trouble. Teachers described him as attentive, the kind of child who noticed things others didn't. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it was usually brief. At home, his parents saw nothing unusual. His father, Mark Taylor, worked long hours, leaving early, returning just before dark. His mother, Elaine, kept things steady. Dinner at the same time, laundry on the same days, weekends spent quietly, often at home. Daniel fit into that rhythm without resistance. He did his homework, ate what was given, slept through the night. There were no signs of distress, no sudden changes, nothing that would make anyone stop and ask questions. In town, life continued the way it always had. Martha Green opened the diner before sunrise, coffee already brewing before the first customer stepped in. Tom Willis ran the hardware store 2 blocks down, where the bell above the door announced every arrival, and across the street, a small playground where children gathered after school, their voices carrying into the early evening air. And it was in places like this, ordinary places, that people would later remember seeing him, standing still, watching, not in a way that felt wrong, just longer than expected. At the time, no one thought much of it, because everything else felt normal. The road stayed quiet, the night stayed calm, and the town remained exactly as it had always been. Safe, familiar, predictable. At least, that's how it felt. Mornings in the town followed a rhythm that rarely changed. By the time the sun began to settle over the rooftops, the first movements had already started. Car engines turning over, doors opening and closing, the low hum of conversation drifting from front yards, and just after 7, Liam Taylor stepped out of his house. He was 9, small for his age but not noticeably so. Dark hair, usually uncombed in the back, on a backpack that always seemed just a little too big for him. He walked the same route every morning, down the narrow stretch of road in front of his house, past a mailbox that leaned slightly to one side, then onto a sidewalk that cracked in familiar places. There was a woman who watered her plants every morning. She would look up as he passed. "Morning, Liam." He always responded the same way, a small nod, sometimes a quiet, "Morning?" Nothing more. Further down, a man sat on his porch with a cup of coffee. He didn't say much, just raised the cup slightly as Liam walked by. These small exchanges, repeated daily, became part of the routine. Expected, unchanged. Liam never rushed. He walked at a steady pace, eyes moving more than his feet seemed to. He noticed things. The way a car door didn't close properly. It's the sound of a loose sign tapping against metal in the wind. A dog that barked at the exact same moment each morning. As if on cue. None of it meant anything, but he noticed. At school, he blended in without effort. He wasn't isolated, but he wasn't the center of anything either. He took his seat near the middle of the classroom, not too close to the front, not far enough back to be overlooked. When the teacher spoke, he listened. When questions were asked, he answered, if called upon. Never early, never late, just when expected. "Liam, can you read the next paragraph?" A pause. He'd look down at the page, follow the lines carefully and read clearly without stumbling. No extra words, no hesitation. "Good," the teacher would say before moving on. Nothing about it stood out, but there were small things, the kind people don't think about until much later. During group activities, while other children talked over each other, Liam often stayed quiet, not disengaged. Watching, his attention didn't drift. It settled on people, on expressions, on moments that passed too quickly for others to notice. If someone laughed, he watched how long it lasted. If someone seemed upset, he didn't look away immediately like most children would. He held his gaze, just a second longer. Not enough to seem strange, just enough to feel different. Recess followed the same pattern each day. Children ran across the playground, voices overlapping, games starting and ending without structure. Liam didn't avoid it. He walked out with the others, stood near the edge at times, joined in occasionally if someone pulled him into it. But more often, he observed, sitting on a low bench, standing near the fence, eyes moving slowly across the space, taking things in. There was no discomfort in him, no visible anxiety, no signs of loneliness. He simply existed, slightly apart, without making it obvious. Afternoons brought him back home the same way he came, the same sidewalk, the same houses, the same quiet acknowledgments from people who had seen him grow up. Even if only over a few years, nothing interrupted that routine. At home, the pattern continued. His mother would ask the same questions. "How was school?" "Fine." "What did you learn?" A small shrug. "Stuff." It wasn't dismissive, it wasn't secretive, just simple. She would check his homework later, sitting across from him at the table. "Did you finish everything?" He'd nod, sliding the notebook toward her. She'd flip through the pages. Neat handwriting, no corrections needed. "Good." Dinner came at the same time each night. His father would arrive just before it was ready, placing his keys in the same spot, washing his hands before sitting down. They spoke about ordinary things. Work, weather, plans for the weekend. Liam listened, occasionally answering if spoken to directly. never interrupting, never adding more than necessary. After dinner, the house grew quieter. Television sounds filled the background. Plates were washed. Lights dimmed one by one. And eventually, Liam would go to his room. There were no unusual habits, no late nights, no restlessness. He slept when he was supposed to, woke when he was supposed to, and the next day repeated everything exactly the same way. Nothing in his life suggested anything out of place, and no one watching him would have felt concerned. No one would have thought to look closer. He was just a quiet child in a quiet town, living a life that moved in steady, predictable loops. And for a while, that was all there was. It didn't begin with fear. It began the way most things in that town did. Small, quiet, almost forgettable. An ordinary afternoon. School had just let out. Children moved through the front gates in loose groups, their voices carrying into the street, fading as they scattered toward home. Liam walked his usual path. Same pace, same direction, same quiet awareness of everything around him. A few steps ahead, a man stood beside a parked truck. He was someone most people recognized. Caleb Morris, mid-30s. Worked part-time doing repairs around town. The kind of person who stopped to talk, even when he didn't have time. He had been speaking to another parent, laughing about something that didn't matter. As Liam approached, Caleb glanced down. "Hey," he said casually, "you heading home?" Liam stopped, just for a moment. He looked at him, not in the way children usually do, not briefly, not distracted. He held his gaze. Caleb smiled, waiting for a response. And then Liam spoke. "You're going to fall," he said quietly. The words weren't rushed. They weren't emphasized. Just placed there. Caleb let out a small laugh. "Fall?" he repeated. "Yeah, I probably will. I'm clumsy enough." The other adult nearby smiled politely, assuming it was just one of those strange things kids say. But Liam didn't react. He didn't smile. Didn't explain. He added one more sentence. "You know, from somewhere high." There was a brief pause. Not long enough to be uncomfortable, and just enough for the moment to feel slightly misplaced. Caleb shrugged. "Well, I'll try to stay on the ground then." Another laugh. Light, dismissive, and that was it. Liam nodded once, then continued walking. The conversation ended before it had time to settle. By the next day, no one was thinking about it. By the second day, it was already fading, just another odd remark from a quiet child. Till it wasn't. It happened less than a week later, late afternoon, a construction site on the edge of town. A place Caleb had been helping out for a few extra hours of work. There were no witnesses to the exact moment. Only the sound. A sudden noise that drew attention, followed by silence. When people reached him, he was already on the ground. They said he shouldn't have been that high up. There was no clear reason, no urgency, no task that required it. But he had been there, and he fell. The news spread the way everything did in that town. Quietly at first, then steadily. From one person to another. At the diner, at the gas station, across front porches in the evening, a tragic accident. That's how it was described. That's how it was accepted. But somewhere in the background, a few people remembered something small, a conversation, a sentence that didn't seem important at the time. "You're going to fall from somewhere high." It wasn't discussed openly, not at first, because saying it out loud made it feel different, made it feel like more than coincidence. So most people didn't say anything. They thought about it briefly, then let it pass. But that's what made it easy to ignore. That, and the fact that nothing else happened. For a while, then everything returned to normal. The routine stayed the same. The town remained quiet. Liam continued walking to school, sitting in class, moving through each day without drawing attention. If he remembered what he said, he gave no sign of it. Weeks passed, then it happened again. This time, it was someone closer. a woman named Denise Harper. She worked at the grocery store near the center of town. Friendly, talkative, the kind of person who greeted everyone by name, even if she'd only met them once. Liam saw her often, after school. On the way home, he would pass through the store with his mother. Denise always noticed him. "There he is," she'd say with a smile. "Aye, quiet as always." One evening, as his mother paid at the counter, Liam stood nearby waiting. Denise looked down at him. "You ever gonna talk more?" she joked lightly. "Or is this all we get?" Liam looked up. Same stillness, same steady gaze. And then he spoke. "Your car won't stop." Denise blinked. "What?" He didn't look away. "It won't stop," he repeated. "Not when it needs to." There was a short silence. Then Denise let out a soft laugh. "Okay, that's a new one." She glanced at Liam's mother, amused. "Kids say the strangest things, don't they?" His mother smiled politely. "Yeah, they do." The moment passed quickly, too quickly to feel serious. Liam didn't say anything else. He simply stood there, as if nothing had been said at all. And once again, it was forgotten, or at least pushed aside. Until 3 days later. It was early evening. The road just outside town curved sharply near a narrow stretch of trees. Most people slowed down there without thinking. Denise didn't. For reasons no one could fully explain, her car didn't stop when it should have. There were no skid marks, no signs of braking. The vehicle crossed the line, left the road, and struck the barrier at full speed. By the time help arrived, it was already over. This time, the memory didn't fade as easily. 2 incidents, 2 separate moments, 2 sentences, spoken quietly, days before. And both had happened, exactly as described. People didn't panic. They didn't gather in crowds or demand answers. That wasn't how things worked there. Instead, something else settled in. A quiet discomfort, a hesitation. Small changes that were hard to notice at first. Conversations that stopped when certain names came up. Glances that lingered just a little longer than before. No one said it clearly. No one wanted to be the first. But the thought was there, unspoken, and growing, because once might be coincidence. Twice, and that felt different. And after the second incident, people didn't speak about it the same way anymore. They still used the word accident. They still nodded, still kept their voices low. But now, there was something underneath it. A question no one wanted to ask directly, because asking it would mean accepting that both moments were connected. And for a while, the town did what it always did best. It continued. Mornings came, shops opened, children went to school. Liam Taylor walked the same path, at the same time, without interruption. Nothing about him changed, not his pace, not his expression, not the quiet way he moved through the world. If he noticed the shift around him, he didn't show it. But others began to notice him. Not openly, just more carefully. A glance that lasted longer than usual. A conversation that paused when he passed by. And it started subtly, then it happened again. This time, it wasn't at school, it was late afternoon. Near the gas station, a man named Robert Hale had stopped to fill his tank. He stood by his car, one hand resting on the handle, looking down the road as if waiting for something. Liam approached from the sidewalk. Same steady walk, same quiet presence. As he passed, Robert gave a brief nod. "Hey, kid." Liam slowed, just slightly. He turned his head and looked at him. There was no tension in his face, no hesitation. "You'll drown," Liam said. The words landed without warning. Flat, unemotional. Robert frowned for a second, then let out a short laugh. "Drown?" he repeated. "I don't even swim." No reaction. Liam held his gaze. "In your car," he added. A pause. Longer this time. Not because of fear, but because the sentence didn't make immediate sense. Robert shook his head, smiling. "All right, I'll stay out of the water then." He said it lightly, almost as a joke, but the moment lingered. Just a second longer than it should have. Liam nodded once and kept walking. By now, stories were starting to connect. Quietly. Someone mentioned hearing something similar before. Another person recalled a strange comment. Days earlier. Individually, they felt small. Together, they began to form something harder to ignore. Still, no one reacted openly. Not yet. 3 days later, the rain started. It wasn't heavy at first, just steady, consistent, enough to change the roads. Water gathered in low areas, ditches filled slowly. By the second evening, certain parts of town had begun to flood. Nothing severe, nothing alarming, and just enough to make people cautious. Robert was driving home when it happened. The road he took cut through a lower section, where water had begun to rise across the surface. Most people turned back, chose another route. For reasons no one could explain, he didn't. His car moved forward, slowly at first, then stalled. The engine cut out. Water continued to rise. Witnesses later said it happened quickly. Too quickly. By the time help arrived, the vehicle was partially submerged, the doors wouldn't open, the windows didn't break easily enough, and inside, Robert Hale remained trapped. This time, people didn't wait days to remember. The sentence came back immediately. "You'll drown. In your car." It spread faster than anything before it. Not loudly, not publicly, but with certainty. Because now, it wasn't just coincidence, it was a pattern. Different people, different circumstances, different kinds of deaths, but always the same structure. A quiet statement, spoken without emotion. Then, days later, it happened, exactly as described. By the fourth incident, no one laughed anymore, they didn't argue. Didn't dismiss it as imagination. They listened, even if they pretended not to. A woman at the post office heard him say, "You won't wake up." A teenager outside a convenience store was told, "It'll be quick, you won't see it." An older man walking his dog paused after hearing, "You'll be alone when it happens." Each time, the reaction was similar. Confusion, discomfort, a forced smile, and then distance. But the outcomes didn't change. Days passed, and one by one, those words matched reality. Not always in the way people expected, not always exactly as imagined, but close enough that the meaning was undeniable. That's when the timing became noticeable. Not just that it happened, but when. Usually within days, rarely more than a week. As if something had already been set in motion, and Liam was simply aware of it. People started adjusting their behavior, small changes at first, crossing the street instead of walking past him, ending conversations early if he was nearby. Parents began watching more closely, not accusing, not confronting, just careful. Liam's own parents noticed it too. The looks, the subtle shifts in how people spoke to them. Or didn't. At first, they didn't understand. Then, someone told them. Not directly, not in detail, just enough. "Your son, he says things." That was how it was phrased. Vague, uncertain, but enough to plant concern. At home, nothing felt different. Liam still followed the same routine. Homework, dinner, sleep. When his mother asked him about school, his answers didn't change. When his father watched him, he saw the same quiet child he always had. There was no sign of awareness, no guilt, no confusion. If he knew what people were saying, he didn't show it. Then came the moment that shifted everything further. A man named Eric Dalton. He had heard the stories, not just pieces, but enough to take them seriously. So when Liam spoke to him, he didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss it. He listened. It happened outside the hardware store, late afternoon. Eric was locking up early, preparing to leave town the next day for work. Liam passed by, slowing slightly, and then, as always, he spoke. "You'll be hit," he said. Eric didn't react immediately. "By what?" he asked. Liam looked at him. "Not a car," he said. "On the road you take every day." A silence followed. He didn't walk away this time. He just stood there, waiting, as if the sentence had already been completed. Eric nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. But this time, there was no smile. That night, he changed everything. He told his wife, took a different route, left earlier than usual. He avoided the road completely for 2 days. Nothing happened. For the first time, someone believed it could be avoided. That maybe it wasn't fixed. That maybe knowing was enough. On the third day, he returned to his routine. Not because he forgot, but because nothing had happened. The fear had started to fade. Just enough. He took the road again. Same time, same direction. Traffic was light, everything normal, until it wasn't. The impact didn't come from the front or behind. And it came from the side, a vehicle running a red light at full speed. He never saw it coming. Witnesses said it was immediate, no time to react, no chance to move. When people heard, the details spread quickly. Not the accident itself, but the fact that he had tried to avoid it. And it still happened. Different timing, different angle, same outcome. After that, something changed in the town, not loudly, not all at once, but steadily. People stopped standing too close to Liam, stopped asking casual questions. Some avoided him entirely. Others watched from a distance. Because now, the question had shifted. It wasn't just about whether he was right, it was about what that meant. Was he seeing something that hadn't happened yet? Or was his words part of the reason it did? No one had an answer, and Liam remained exactly the same. Walking, watching, speaking, only when he chose to. As if nothing around him had changed at all. By the time it happened again, the town was already different. Not visibly. The streets were still quiet. The routine still held together, but underneath it, something had shifted. People no longer brushed things aside. They listened, even when they pretended not to. They paid attention to who Liam spoke to and what he said. Because now, it mattered. And then, he said something that couldn't be ignored. It wasn't to a stranger. It wasn't to someone on the edge of town or passing through. It was to someone everyone knew, someone people trusted, someone who had been there longer than most. His name was Daniel Reeves. He was a teacher, not just any teacher, but the one who had taught generations of children in that town. Calm, patient, respected. Yeah, he knew Liam well, had seen him every day in class, had spoken to him more than most adults had. If anyone could make sense of the boy, it would have been him. The moment came quietly, late afternoon, after school had ended. The classroom was nearly empty. A few students had already left, their voices fading down the hallway. Daniel stood at his desk, gathering papers. Liam remained seated, still watching. Daniel noticed after a moment. "You heading home?" he asked casually. Liam didn't move right away. Then, slowly, he stood. He walked toward the front of the room, stopped just a few feet away, and looked at him, the same way he always did. Steady, unwavering. Daniel waited, expecting a simple answer. Instead, Liam spoke. "It'll happen here," he said. A pause. Daniel frowned slightly. "What will?" Liam didn't hesitate. "You won't leave this room." Silence. The words didn't land like a joke. They didn't carry any emotion at all, just a statement. Daniel let out a quiet breath. There was no laughter this time, no easy dismissal, because by now, he had heard the stories, Not all of them, but enough. "Liam," he said carefully. "What do you mean by that?" Liam didn't look away. "It'll be sudden," he said. "You won't expect it." The room felt smaller for a moment, not because anything had changed, but because of how still everything became. Daniel stepped back slightly, not out of fear, but uncertainty. "Okay," he said after a second. "That's enough for today." His voice remained calm, controlled. He reached for his bag, as if ending the moment himself. "Go on home." Liam nodded, turned, and walked out of the room. Just like that. No reaction, and no explanation. Daniel didn't leave immediately. He stood there for a while, looking at the doorway Liam had just passed through. Then he moved. Quickly. Out into the hallway, down toward the front office. Within the hour. People knew, not in detail, but enough. And this time, they didn't stay quiet. Because this wasn't someone distant. This wasn't someone passing through. This was someone they all knew, and they weren't going to ignore it. That night, Daniel didn't go home alone. People stayed with him. Friends, colleagues, even neighbors who insisted on checking in. They kept him occupied, talking, sitting nearby, making sure he wasn't left in silence. The next day, he didn't return to the classroom. The school adjusted. Classes were covered. Schedules shifted. No one said it openly, but everyone understood why. They kept him away from that room, as if distance could change something. Days passed, nothing happened. By the third day, the tension had started to stretch thin, not disappear, just lose its edge. Because nothing had happened. Because maybe this time it wouldn't, but they didn't take chances. He wasn't left alone, not during the day, not at night. Someone was always nearby, watching, waiting, trying to stay ahead of something they didn't understand. On the fifth day, Daniel made a decision. He wanted to go back, not to teach, just to see it, to stand in the room, and prove to himself that it didn't matter, that it wasn't real. They argued with him, told him to wait, told him it wasn't necessary, but he insisted, because the longer he stayed away, the more it felt like something had already been decided. So he went. Late afternoon. The building was quiet. Most students had already gone. A few staff members remained, watching from a distance. He walked down the hallway slowly, each step echoing slightly, as if the space itself was holding its breath. When he reached the classroom, he stopped, hand on the door, just for a moment. Then he opened it. Everything inside was the same. Desks in place, papers stacked neatly, nothing out of order, nothing unusual. He stepped in, one foot, then the other. And for a few seconds, nothing happened. He let out a breath, a small one, relief, just beginning to form. Then it happened. Not dramatically, not loudly. He moved toward his desk, reaching for something he had left behind. And then he stopped, mid-step, as if something inside him had simply shut off. No warning, no struggle. He collapsed where he stood. By the time anyone reached him, it was already over. They said it was his heart. Sudden, unpredictable. There had been no signs, no history, nothing that suggested it, except the sentence. "You won't leave this room." This time, there was no discussion, no attempt to explain it away, because everything had been done. He had been watched, protected, kept away, and it still happened. Exactly as it was said. After that, someone finally asked, not quietly, not indirectly, directly. It would happen the next day, outside Liam's house. A small group had gathered, not angry, not shouting, just needing an answer. Liam stood near the front yard, still, calm, the same as always. An older man stepped forward, voice steady, but strained. "How do you know?" he asked. No one else spoke. No one interrupted. Liam looked at him, and for the first time, there was a pause before he answered. Not hesitation, just stillness. I see it, he said. The man frowned slightly. See what? Liam's voice didn't change. Before it happens. Silence settled over the group. No one moved. No one questioned it immediately because the way he said it left no room for interpretation. Then someone else spoke. A woman this time. Quieter. When? She asked. Liam shifted his gaze, looked at her, and answered. I see when too. The words were simple, but they landed heavier than anything before. Because it meant something more, something they hadn't fully considered. It wasn't just how, it wasn't just the event, it was the moment, the exact point in time, already fixed, already known. And as the silence stretched, another realization followed. If he could see when it would happen, then he had always known. Every person, every moment, from the beginning. All of it. Not discovered over time. Not revealed piece by piece. Just there, waiting. And Liam stood exactly as he always had. Quiet, unchanged, as if nothing he had said carried any weight at all. After that day, no one tried to explain it anymore. There were no more quiet debates over coincidence. No more attempts to reduce it to chance or misunderstanding. Something had been accepted, not openly. Not in words anyone wanted to repeat, but accepted. The town didn't change all at once. It shifted slowly, in the way people moved, in the way they spoke, in the things they chose not to say. Places that were once filled with casual conversation grew quieter. At the diner, voices stayed low. At the store, exchanges became shorter, and when Liam's name came up, it didn't stay in the air for long. People stopped saying it. Not out of respect, out of discomfort. Children were told, gently at first, then more firmly, don't go near him. Don't talk to him if you can help it. No explanations, just instructions. At school, the distance became visible. Seats around him remained empty a little longer than usual. Group activities shifted, without anyone being told to move. Teachers noticed it, but they tried to correct it, encourage inclusion, normal interaction. But even they hesitated, not in what they said, but in how they watched him. A little more carefully than before. Liam didn't react. If he noticed the space forming around him, he gave no sign. He still arrived on time, still sat where he always had, still listened, answered, existed in the same quiet way. But something had changed in what people expected from him, or feared from him. At home, the tension was harder to ignore. His parents couldn't avoid it anymore. The looks, the silence when they entered certain places, the conversations that stopped. Too quickly, people didn't confront them, they didn't accuse, but they watched, as if waiting for something else to happen. Questions began to surface, quietly, behind closed doors. What did he know? How much did he see? And the one no one wanted to ask out loud? Could it be stopped? His parents responded the only way they knew how. They pulled inward, limited where he went, paid closer attention to what he said. Conversations at home became more direct. If you feel like saying something, don't, his mother told him one evening. Her voice wasn't harsh, just controlled. Not outside, not to other people. His father said less, but watched more, trying to understand something that didn't behave the way anything should. Liam listened, the same way he always did. Quietly, no argument, no confusion, just a small nod. And after that, he spoke less. Not completely silent, but careful. Measured, as if he understood, without needing it explained. The town noticed, not immediately, but over time. The comments stopped, the strange sentences. no longer heard in passing conversations. No one was told anything new. No new moments to remember. And for a while, that brought something close to relief. Not comfort, but less tension. Because without new predictions, there was nothing to wait for, nothing to connect. Life began to settle again, slowly, carefully, but not completely. Because even without hearing him speak, people still wondered if he wasn't saying it anymore, and did that mean he wasn't seeing it? Or just choosing not to say it? That question stayed, unanswered, and it showed in small ways. People avoided eye contact when passing him, crossed the street, even when there was no reason to. Not out of anger, not even fear in the usual sense. Just a need for distance. Because being near him meant being seen, and no one was sure what that meant anymore. At night, the town felt different, quieter than before. Not because less was happening, but because people were listening more to small sounds, to silence, to anything that felt out of place. Every unexpected event, every sudden illness, every accident carried a question behind it now, even if no one said it. Was it already known? Had it been seen and simply left unspoken? Liam continued his routine. Morning walks, school, evenings at home, unchanged. But the way the town existed around him never returned to what it was. Because once something like that settles in, it doesn't leave. It stays. In the spaces between conversations. In the pauses that last too long. In the quiet understanding that something is there, whether it's spoken or not. And somewhere within all of it, Liam remained exactly the same. Silent when expected. Still when watched. As if none of it had ever been about him at all. Only what he could see, and what he chose not to say. Today, like, the town looks the same. The roads are still narrow. The houses still sit quietly behind low fences. In the evenings, radios hum softly through open windows, and dogs bark at passing shadows that never quite reveal themselves. If you pass through, there's nothing that would make you stop. Nothing that suggests anything ever happened there. People still greet each other. Shops still open at the same time each morning. The rhythm, the routine, it all feels intact. But those who have lived there long enough know the difference. It's not something you can point to. It's in the pauses. In the way certain conversations never fully begin, in the way some names are no longer said. Liam Taylor is one of them. At some point, he simply wasn't there anymore. No announcement, no clear explanation. His family left quietly, or at least that's what most people believe. Some say it happened within a week. Others remember it taking longer. No one agrees on the exact moment. Only that one day. He was still walking those same streets. And then, he wasn't. No one followed. No one asked too many questions. Because by then, people had learned not to. Over time, the town adjusted. New routines formed. Old memories settled into something quieter. The stories didn't disappear, but they changed. Spoken less often. Shared only in certain company. And usually in lowered voices. Sometimes, late at night, someone will bring it up. Not as a story, more like a question. About what he said, about what he saw, and whether any of it was ever meant to be understood. There's one detail that never fully faded. Something a few people claim to remember. Not clearly. Not the same way, but close enough. That it stayed. They say, near the end, Liam said something about himself. Not to a group. Not out loud for everyone to hear. Just once. Quietly. The way he always spoke. No one agrees on the exact words. Only the meaning. That he had seen his own future. The same way he had seen everyone else's. And if that's true, then whatever he saw wasn't something he tried to stop. Because he never tried to stop anything. He only said it, or chose not to. And then, he was gone. The town never found out where he went. never confirmed what happened next. Life continued, it always does. But every so often, when something happens without warning, when a moment arrives too suddenly, too precisely, someone remembers, not the details, just the feeling, of a quiet voice and saying something it shouldn't know, and the certainty that followed. Because if he was right about everyone else, then whatever he saw for himself may have already happened.